This is our IFS presentation in partnership with ProcessMaker. I am going to let my colleague, Tim, start with introductions.
Thanks, Brandy. I'm Tim Wadley. I'm Vice President of Product Management at IFS, and I'm excited to share today on how we use ProcessMaker and how that provides value to our clients. So, Brandy, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I am Brandy Great, a product manager here at IFS, and I'm happy to be here, and I can't wait to discuss everything. But first, Tim, I want to know a little bit more about IFS. Can you tell me about them?
Yeah, IFS is a market-leading worldwide software provider focused on ERP, EAM, ESM, customer experience management, and one of the sectors that they focus on is energy, the energy sector. Brandy and I are a part of that team focused on upstream oil and gas industry, and our products cover land production and accounting functionality that is required to manage producing wells. Upstream oil and gas is unique in that each well has its own ownership, and thus the accounting is very complex and done at the well level, and we manage the ownership of the well, the cost, the joint interest billing, the revenue associated with that production. So very, very specific to that niche, but that is what we do.
So it sounds like IFS does a lot. Could you expand on why we've partnered with ProcessMaker? What gaps were we looking to fill?
So there's really two main things that we were looking at for ProcessMaker. First, there are some gaps in our functionality or edge stories or workflows that we couldn't manage within the application. The second thing is that we wanted a solution that could really provide that same functionality for multiple products. So our solutions are on multiple architectures. We have some overlap in functionality. And if we wanted to add a new piece of functionality, we wanted it to be able to work for as many of our clients as it possibly could. And so having a third-party tool that could plug into our different architectures provided a lot of value.
Okay, that sounds good. Can you tell me a little bit about the journey into choosing ProcessMaker as our partner?
Excuse me. Well, we went through quite a selection process. This was a little over 5 years ago, where we defined what our requirements are, both technically and functionally. We went to market and looked at all the different options that are in the market. We probably looked at least 10 different workflow solutions. We evaluated those solutions. Once we get down to our top few, then we really looked at commercial terms and how that would fit with P2 and selected ProcessMaker. And really, I would say the main reason that we selected ProcessMaker is because the API structure, we were able to build workflows that would work with any of our architectures and databases and could easily plug and play and interact with our applications and become a seamless part of our applications. And so it was a really nice fit for ProcessMaker with our solutions.
And have you experienced any challenges with implementing ProcessMaker?
Well, I wish I could say that we didn't have any challenges at all, but of course that's not the case. We are working on some of our solutions have older technology and they don't have API. So even though ProcessMaker is API driven, since our applications aren't all API driven, then we had to build a lot of new APIs, and we're still doing that today. As we create new workflows, then we build the new APIs that are required for that workflow because we wanted to integrate with our applications. And that part is probably the most time consuming, is getting and developing those APIs that are required. There's an awful lot of logic in some of these things that we're doing that has to be then created in that API. Secondly, there's lack of standards of our architecture. I guess I already talked about this, but there's lots of different databases, different tool sets from Unidata to Oracle to MS SQL. I mean, it's just a lot of different tools, and that lack of architecture as a standard means that we have to do something different in a lot of different places. as well as we're just working on outside of this project, but coming to a standard security model. And so then how does ProcessMaker fit with that standard security model? So all those things have been challenges along the way, but we've also had a lot of really good successes. So any other questions on challenges, Brandy, or should we shift gears?
No, I want to shift straight to successes.
Well, then let's talk about some of the successes. So when we talk about upstream oil and gas, you talk about drilling new wells, right? But before you can drill the well, you have to have the geology on that well. You have to have the land ownership in that well. You have to have all the finances in line, the authorization for expenditure. All of that stuff has to be collected before that well really becomes any more than just a thought or a dot on the map. So it's a really complex process that we didn't handle in our applications. We handle once the well has already been completed and started producing. So it's a very complex process. Is that right, Brandy? Anything to add to that?
Well, no, you're absolutely correct. New well was actually one of our earliest processes that we did build out with one of our earliest customers. So it's a huge need and something that is on the mind of our customers. And they really needed that solution to convey out all those details. There isn't really a system in our space that houses all of the details. So they were being kept on Excel, Access, there was versioning issues. So really getting all of those details from engineering, providing the depth of the well and the physical aspects, to land being able to keep the ownership next to that, and accounting being in the know so that they don't have to go back and reverse anything to pay for things like equipment or labor was huge.
So they had all these files, and they were probably keeping them on a common drive somewhere, right? So what does our solution look like? What did we build for them? Do you want to show that?
Sure. So we bring all the departments to one central location. We're looking at the process map now, but this is a true whole office solution. We do have automated emails that kick off at every step, and that was one of our huge wins, being able to communicate out not just that there's a new well, but the details that everybody is needing and the details that everybody needs to provide. A few examples, I've got some forms here. We're looking at just high-level location information, which is then followed up by the ownership of a well. So it's all in one location for everybody to see, and there is no versioning. It's all the same data, the same information.
So that was just a few of the fields that are collected, because there must be 80 different fields that we collect on before a well really becomes a well, right?
As I mentioned, there's fields in there for the actual physical depth of the well when it starts first producing. If it has started first producing, the first time a rig is on site, very detailed. It goes deep in that workflow.
And all of that is captured in that one place, like you said, the single version, so you don't have people opening the wrong file and looking at the wrong thing.
That's right. It's all the most up-to-date information, and it does go through an approval process, as we saw in the form. And once that approval is done, so all the data is the most up-to-date, and once the approval is done, we actually integrate it back to our accounting system. We could also, leverage ProcessMaker to integrate it to a land system or a production or an engineering system. But in this case, the accounting system was the focus.
Yeah, it doesn't look like a very complex workflow. There aren't that many steps, but there's so much data and so many people add data to that workflow that's where the real value comes in, isn't it?
It is, and I could only take a few screenshots because the form is so long just due to the data size.
Yeah, the number of data points. So
that's it.
So that was a great workflow for us. Another one that is a big pain point in upstream oil and gas. As I've mentioned, that each well has different ownership. Well, if the surface owner um, happens to pass away and they pass that ownership then onto their children, then there's a change of ownership. And it's not just if somebody passes away, if somebody moves, if there's a divorce, if sometimes they sell the property. There's lots of different reasons why that ownership would change, but it becomes a big issue when you're operating thousands of wells. And tell us a little bit, Brandy, how do they manage that process today? And then we can get into our solution.
Yeah, no problem. So you're right. The ownership is not static, which creates a pretty big workload. And the more wells you have, obviously, the more ownership changes you're going to have. Some of our clients have people that only focus on ownership changes due to the sheer volume of them. But it's really kicked off when a call or a document is received, letting our customers know that there's been a sale, a death, a divorce, whatever the reason is for the change. And there's always documents associated, and there's very specific documents associated with each type of change. So we find that most people just know what documents are needed, but it's really all driven outside of the system by phone, by mail, by fax. And then once they get these documents, all the documents they need, then they need to apply the change in the accounting system, which actually is quite a few screens. So it is very labor intensive and very redundant. This process is.
So what I'm hearing is that they probably have a folder on their desk with lots of different changes going, maybe a folder for each change. They might have, there might be 100 changes a month, and they have a folder for each. They contact people, say, hey, I need this form. They wait for it. When they get it, they put it in the folder. When they get everything in the folder they need, then they can go into the system and make the change.
That's right. And owners, for whatever reason, the new owners can forget to send in documents. So those folders can be sitting there for months, sometimes years, waiting to be processed.
So how did we help clients manage that process?
So we actually did a few things. We tackled a few of the issues in one workflow. On the main screen, that when I receive a document, I log into ProcessMaker, and I see all of my old owner data. So if I'm on the phone, I can just type in that old owner's name. It's connected directly to accounting. So there is not a lot of room for, say, fat fingering and not being able to find that old owner in your system. And we pull in all of the owner details for them. So instead of having to go to the accounting system after the call, they get to see all that data right there, and it shows all the wells that they're in, as well as the percentage and any money that might be currently owed to them. So we've really streamlined the information process, but more specifically, we also have a document audit enforcement part of the form right here. I'm showing it. So you choose your change type, and it tells you exactly what documents are required, and it will not let you process until you've acknowledged that those documents have been received. So we have
Not
made
just
sure.
received, but you also then attach them to the case, the workflow process, right?
Always. Every workflow we have requires some sort of file upload, specifically for audit and end of process packages to make sure that, whether it's a source document or a system generated document, it's all together. But depending on the change type, these dynamically change. So not only are we bringing in, as you can see here, this old owner information, which used to be a separate process in a separate system, but we're also enforcing the document requirements. And then if we look at the process map, once we receive those documents, as well as have all the other information we need, which is really not a lot, it's the new owner information. Everything else is really pulling from your accounting system. We do go through an approval. And once that is approved, so here's our approval. So there's always someone that looks over and makes sure that, yes, you've got all the documents and yes, this change is good to go. Once we have that change, we actually update all of the different screens for the accountant. So we really took a process that started outside of a system, and then once it was ready to move to a system, had about 7 screens for processing. We took that down to 2 screens and gave the documents a home. As well as automated emails to new owners with what documents are required. So we really tackled it on multiple fronts.
And it sounds like, I mean, if that process goes on for months, that case will stay open. And as soon as then they get the documents, but they can do reports of what open transfers are, ownership changes are in the works. What are they waiting for? They can set up ticklers to contact the people to say, hey, send me this. I'm still waiting for this.
It's no longer just sitting on someone's desk in a black hole.
Yeah, exactly. So the next one that I wanted to talk about was really around AP management, vendor management. Oil and gas is a distributed business, meaning that most of the things that are purchased or at least that are delivered to the field. So if you're operating 1,000 wells in 3 different states and multiple district and field offices, then you have vendors all over those 3 states. You have delivery in those to those different locations. Tracking all of that can be complex and is often done outside the system. Is that right, Brandy?
That is right. The field very rarely, in fact, I've never seen it, gets access to the accounting system or to a warehouse system to help track vendor communication, what's been received and where. It usually doesn't have a home except for email.
Yeah. So, and then rather than doing it through email with literally thousands, even the smaller companies have thousands of vendors, just because there's so many different types of stuff that oil and gas companies need to purchase and manage. So what is the solution? How did we manage that? How do we help our clients manage that process?
So this might be one of my all-time favorites. It is a vendor portal. We created not just one workflow, but multiple workflows to create a solution for vendor interaction, if you will. One of the first ones we start with is vendor registration. So just getting to be able to do business with our clients is huge. There's oftentimes required documents such as W-9s, direct deposit forms, ACH forms, all sorts of forms. So those have to be enforced, received, and make sure that they are up to date, but also just getting all the vendor data. For the most part, this has been our clients hand keying into their system, vendor name, vendor address, vendor bank account, just really heavy on the data entry side. Well, with the vendor registration, we have put the power into the vendor's hands. So the vendor actually adds in all of their details. And once approved, it goes ahead and updates the back office accounting. So we have really eliminated all of that data entry. But one of the great things and one of the things I love about this workflow is that we actually send based on documents. So take a W-9, we'll say it needs to be updated yearly. Every year, vendors get emails letting them know that their documents need to be updated. And then the vendor can log into the portal via the website or however our customers choose to offer that portal and update those documents. No more chasing around from the back end or having to remember who needs to do what document. It's all right there in the system. But really, because ProcessMaker offers those web entry links, we're able to embed the links to create this vendor portal in our customers' websites. So it's easy to find, easy to manage, and again, takes the onus off the back office to provide access or any data entry.
So
Another part.
how many vendors does one of our customers in South America, how many vendors do they have that have used this?
Yeah, they've got about 200 vendors.
Okay.
So a nice volume, and they're managing them all through the vendor registration, new vendors as well as updating vendor records.
And that's from their portal. So you go to their URL, their website, and then click on this, and then you can set yourselves up as a vendor. Of course, it has to be approved by them, but then
yes,
our client doesn't have to type in anything. Everything's typed in by the vendor.
Right. So the vendor portal is really about vendor empowerment, which we could also talk about putting the onus on the vendor to make sure that everything is entered up to date and correct.
Yeah. So let's talk about the next. So good receipt. That's the next.
Right.
step.
So as I mentioned, the vendor portal is actually a collection of workflows. So once a vendor is registered, it means they can start doing business with our client. And once they start doing business, goods or services gets ordered from a vendor and then is of course delivered. So we call that a good receipt. So the good receipt workflow, again, you log into or you go to the client's website and you log into the vendor portal. And we've got it set up where the integration with accounting provides most of the details, including purchase order, quantity ordered, all the vendor details are coming from the accounting system. So the vendor need only enter how many of a good or a service were delivered, whether it's 100%, 50%, whatever it is, and they send that on for approval. So the vendor's only entering in one thing, with, of course, the option to upload source documentation or any sort of receipt from delivery. And again, the back office is just approving or rejecting that this good was received. They don't need to do any more data entry. Once approved, just like the other ones, it's going to update accounting and it's going to start, let's say I ordered 10 things, 5 were delivered. So that's going to leave me 5 open for this vendor of whatever good or services I had ordered. So the next time the vendor logs in, instead of seeing 10 quantity, they're only going to see 5. So we really enforce that what was ordered is what is delivered. So it matches to that purchase order, part of that 3-way match, which is another huge value add.
Well, then is that paid automatically by the accounting system?
It's not. So in our case, in our portal, they say that the good has been delivered. Once approved, we do have a step in between, a regulatory step, specifically because the client we built this out for, as you mentioned, is in Mexico, and there is a regulatory step there. So whether you are local to Mexico or not, you still have to go through this, and it's called national content, and it's very simple. It is a tax workflow, but you go in here, and if you're a foreign vendor, you simply request exemption. If you are a local vendor to Mexico, you have a form, and this is the actual form, where we on the fly process these national content letters based upon the math that was entered here. Now, this is very complex math. So also right here within the form, we have a guide on how to calculate the PCN or the percentage due. We also provide a copy to the good receipt should they need to be reminded of maybe how many goods or services were delivered. So we're actually doing a lot right here in this one screen. But once this is complete, and I guess I'll just highlight, this is what a lot of the other vendor forms look like, pulling in data from the accounting system, making it easier for the vendors to also input data. But once this is done, then they can go on to invoicing. So whether you provided 100% or 50% of the goods, you can still provide an invoice once everything is approved. Invoicing is pretty complex, as you can see. We actually offer multiple start points. There are going to be vendors with purchase orders and vendors without. There's things like expense reports. All of these scenarios had to be accounted for and built into this workflow. So once your prerequisites are complete, you can come in here, provide an invoice, again, upload it, enter in a few high-level details, amount, because all your purchase order and everything is already selected and pulling in from the accounting system. And once approved, it does become an invoice in our accounting system to be paid. So there's that, again, back office integration to eliminate a lot of the data entry that was happening before. No longer do you have to sit there with a PDF copy on one screen of an invoice and your accounting system on another and enter in all those details. We have done away with that.
So I kind of skipped a step there because I was jumping to invoicing and payment already without the tax calculation in there. But this does get to what I was alluding to, and you mentioned the three-way match, where if you have a approved procurement from a specific vendor at a certain price, and then it's delivered and that receipt of goods is accepted, then the invoice can be paid, and that is all automated and it all ties back together. Did I sum that up right?
You did, because each part of the workflow is dependent upon another. So all that data is in there, and it completes that three-way match and makes sure that you didn't get more or less of what was ordered, and really helps monitor costs while also eliminating the data entry. And making it easier for vendors to get their invoices in. Vendors that were still sending them by mail obviously have a quicker option to get their invoice in front of our clients now simply by inputting them. So you can, the sooner you get them, the sooner you can maybe take advantage of those early pay, 10% off and things like that as well.
The discounts.
Discounts, yes.
Yeah. All right. That is that's really, like you said, a set of workflows. It's not just one, it's a whole process that it covers, but really reduces the AP processing, which is one of the most expensive aspects of processing. When you think of accounting, they talk about, how many invoices can one AP accountant manage. And in this case, you're upping that number significantly. Do you know how many invoices processed through this in a typical month for the client in Mexico?
Typical month, we're looking at probably about 800. There's been about 10,000 for the fiscal year of 2022. So divide that by 12.
Yeah,
guesstimate of 800.
Great. That's a lot of work, though, typing all that in if you didn't have it.
It is, and we didn't even highlight the request for quotation workflow or the PO communication. So there are still more workflows within this entire portal, this procure to pay, if you will, that we didn't even cover here. So it is more extensive.
Yeah.
But it is one of my favorite things that we've done with ProcessMaker so far.
Okay, are we ready to move on to the next item?
I think so.
Look at that. So in oil and gas, I kind of already talked about the distributed nature. And then we talked about the procurement, how many different vendors you have, all those different supplies. Well, as that material and that supply comes into a company, it often goes into a warehouse, or sometimes it goes straight to the well. But all that has to be accounted for. And Oil and gas also has some unique things like a well may shut in and you may move that pump from one well to a different well. And so tracking, as I indicated, each well has different ownership. So tracking that material moving from well to well and what is the cost basis for that pump that now you're using on a different well with different ownership, that's a complex process. Do you know how people do that today, mainly, Brandy?
Yeah, so this is actually one of our more popular workflows, really because I think as you'd mentioned, even at the very beginning, a lot of the times the field personnel are sending an email, and it's not to accounting, it's to the warehouse to see, hey, do we have these tubes? Where are they? Can you get them over here? Can you order more? And then at the end of the month, the warehouse shares their spreadsheet, which is monstrous, with accounting. And then accounting then has to go through this spreadsheet one line at a time and enter into the accounting system all of the material transfers that happen that month. So it's not even weekly, it's a month worth. And then of course you run into having to reconcile because you never perfectly enter something in the first time, especially when it's got that many lines to go through. So very, very much segregated, very disparate process right now.
I know one company was, like operated like 3 months behind from where the warehouse was to where accounting was. I have to think that's pretty typical.
It is just because getting this data to accounting isn't usually something that's high on the priority for the warehouse or the field, right? They just want to go ahead and get their tubing here now. It's an afterthought to alert accounting, which of course accounting takes issue with because now they've got additional work.
So today, if they're using a ticket, manually writing something or sending an email to the warehouse, what did we do? How did we use ProcessMaker to help them streamline this process?
So we created a solution that uses actually the ProcessMaker app so that the field folks can request directly from the field on their phone through a ProcessMaker form, which then, of course, alerts the warehouse, who is notified by an automated email. Warehouse either approves, denies, puts in, I moved it from here to here. They get all those high level details. And once they hit, next, it actually updates the accounting system. So nobody has to proactively let accounting know, but it's happening, right then, right when the transfer is occurring. So then accounting goes in and makes sure that, everything is good, and they save that record, and all of a sudden they're no longer behind. But it really connects the field through the app to the warehouse, which uses normal desktop ProcessMaker, and then accounting, who only needs to check their accounting record, if they even need to do that.
So let's see what that looks like, Brandy. What does that workflow look like?
So it is another one of our more complex, even though I just feel like I made it sound pretty easy. But as you mentioned, there are multiple materials that can go from well to well. So we do have different steps, different groups, such as LMS or SEM supply chain, that does need to review and make sure that the material is on hand. So we've accounted for all that. We did also add in the accounting approval if they would like it before it goes to accounting. One client leverages it, one client does not. So it's really client dependent. And then I don't think I have a form. I don't. But that's really it. Looking at it right here, we even have the offline. Oh,
It sounds like the main advantage here is that the mobile form, so that the people in the field can actually access what is the inventory that's coming from accounting directly, and then they're getting the right inventory, they're selecting the right piece, and then the transfer. And so they're minimizing errors in the process, and also reducing the manual effort then on the back end to reconcile between the different groups.
Yes, all starting there with that field. We even have a step for offline processing in case they don't have internet access. They can still fill out the form so that when they get into an internet zone, it's already done for them. They don't have to remember or take notes and then enter it. We make sure that the field can always access the form that they need to kick this off. We've had huge success with it. Clients love it.
Yeah, that's great. So I think from my perspective, those are the four that we really wanted to highlight. And I think those four really did a great job of showing, when I talk about filling gaps like between our applications or in front of our applications, we're not replacing our applications, or even most of the time, this isn't like a core function within our application, which we already had in the application. What this is adding on kind of around the application and streamlining the business process so that companies can operate more lean. Oil and gas is notoriously up and down with supply, with cost, I guess, oil and gas pricing, with demand drives price. So oil and gas companies, I think what we're seeing now, though, are really trying to reduce their overall cost of things that they're doing manually today, or they're having to do reconciliations on, and how can they reduce that process so it just becomes easier, they can move faster, they can drill more wells, they can become more profitable. So
Right.
that's a big trend I see. Do you see some other trends in the industry with either oil and gas or with workflow ProcessMaker type
Well, you really
trends?
covered it. You really covered it there with, well, we talked about procure to pay, vendor portal. That is something actually that I'm hearing a lot about, specifically around purchase orders and the three-way match. So it's cool that we already have something that we can just tailor and customize. To their needs, but also, yeah, getting up and getting going and being more lean, quicker onboarding, quicker training, extending core functionality, if you will, so that they don't have to um, keep details somewhere that are easy to get lost. Really just making sure that what they order is what they pay for, and focusing on every little penny.
Yeah, that quick onboarding, highlighting that one a little bit more. With one of the advantages of ProcessMaker is that we can spin up workflows very, very quickly to demo to people. Just recently, we had a client who was looking for some very specific functionality around AP processing that one of our competitors had some capability in, and we were able to spin up a demo for them in a very short period of time. Brandy, can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, no, that's actually maybe my favorite success story. Um, what I highlighted with the vendor portal really was built in conjunction with our customer in Mexico. So we were approached a few months ago about a customer in the US who needed an AP invoice entry that tied to accounting because they were tired of our competitors entering it into one system and then having to enter it into another. So within about, I would say, I spent maybe 3 hours creating all the forms and the process map, and then handed that off to my senior developer, who in about 4 hours connected it to our accounting system. So in 7 hours time, we had a working workflow that landed us the deal, and the client is currently live, not just on ProcessMaker, but our accounting solution. And what won us the deal was the AP invoice system.
Yeah, that's just a phenomenal story. So All right. Anything else you want to share, Brandy, or should we open it up for questions? Or
I'm ready for questions.
all right, any questions out there?